last week's presentation workshop, I think, was focused on relationships, having healthy relationships, being aware of boundaries. And this week, we're going to be focusing on mental health issues that might arise with students who you're going to be working with. I think that this year is going to be a very challenging year, in particular because of Corona. I hope as the year goes on, things will start to normalize more. But besides that, there's just general issues and challenges that arise during seminary year. So we want to focus on some of them. So we're hoping for this to be somewhat interactive. As we go, we're going to ask you guys, we're going to open it up for questions. So please, as we're speaking, if any questions come to mind, you can jot it down. Feel free to interject or to ask questions when we open it up for that. Also, I just wanted to mention that in regard to the students coming in, a lot of students are coming in with pre-existing issues that schools may or may not be aware of, and some students are going to develop issues over the course of the year, perhaps being away from their families, and just their familiar environments. Certain issues might come out this year. So our agenda for this meeting is to talk about trauma, mental health, mental illness warning signs, self-harm, addiction, suicidality, and how to handle emergencies. Okay, so first, what is trauma? People, it's a term that we use often, oh, I'm so traumatized. But what is it really? This is a technical definition, but trauma is an emotional response to a deeply distressing event, usually involving threat to the physical integrity of self or others, and which involves fear, helplessness, or horror. So here are some examples of traumas. Obviously, trauma, it doesn't have to fall into one of these into these categories, but these are main categories that you could look out for, be aware of. So the first possible type of trauma is domestic or family violence or dating violence. So this would be if there was, if the parents were physically violent in the house, or either to the kids or to one another. That can be very traumatic for children growing up, obviously. The second one is community violence. Probably a lot of these would be not so relevant to, girls we're going to be having in seminary, but in terms of shootings, muggings, burglaries, assault. The last one, bullying, is something that you might have students who have been victims of when they were younger. The next one, sexual or physical abuse. The next one is natural disasters such as hurricanes, flood, fires, or earthquakes. That also is probably less relevant to the girls in seminary. Possibly fires, but not so common. A serious car accident is another potential trauma people could experience. Sudden, unexpected, or violent death of someone close. Serious injury, burn, dog attack, major surgery or life-threatening illness, such as childhood cancer. It could be either they experienced it or a family member. And war or political violence, not so relevant. More relevant, I would say, people growing up in Israel, but not people coming from outside of Israel. So after experiencing trauma, oftentimes people can develop PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So there's many different symptoms that could be part of PTSD. I'm just going to go through a bunch of them, just again to give you an idea of things to be looking out for. So the first one is continuously experiencing distressing memories of the event, of the traumatic event, dreams, and or flashbacks. So it could be just thinking about the event that happened. It could be the memories of the event come up in the form of dreams, or actually flashbacks where something triggers you and you feel like you're back there, like it's happening again, and that can be extremely scary and dysregulating. The next one is becoming extremely emotional when exposed to something that reminds a person about the event. So it could be a certain smell, it could be hearing a certain song, touching a certain material. It can just trigger memories of the event and bring the person back to it. Trying to avoid memories, thoughts, and feelings about the event. Oftentimes, because it's so uncomfortable and unpleasant to think about traumatic events, people just avoid thinking about it and feeling anything connected to it. inability to remember parts of the event. So sometimes people consciously try to block out the event, and sometimes unconsciously people block out the event and might not really remember very much about it or certain parts of it. Self-blame is very common. So if you notice students, talking about blaming themselves for something, being very self-critical, oftentimes that's what happens when people are victimized. Persistent negative emotions, difficulty experiencing positive emotions. So just feeling like the world is a dangerous place, feeling hopeless, feeling anxious all the time, not being able to engage in what normally would be experiences that they would enjoy, being very irritable, reckless, self-destructive behavior, constantly being on guard. So we call this hypervigilance. So always a sense, never being able to relax, always sort of scanning the environment and looking out for danger. Difficulty concentrating. So if you see some girls just can't focus in class and not able to concentrate on material they're studying, could be there's something deeper going on. And sleep disturbance, difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, or restless sleep. Does anybody have any questions about this part regarding trauma? No. Okay.
No questions in the chat box. Okay. So now we're gonna go through some mental health warning signs, and this is the agenda that we're gonna cover, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard some of these terms or phrases: depression, anxiety, eating issues, extreme friendships, relationship issues, and history of family conflict and drama and trauma. And now we're gonna get into them. But before we get into each one specific, we wanted to discuss how do you know when behaviors are out of the ordinary or ordinary. So there's a lot of behaviors because seminary is a huge adjustment. Living in a seminary dorm with a lot of girls away in Israel, like 6,000 miles away from home, is a really difficult transition. So we wanted to discuss what is normal and typical, and what is a cause for concern and should be kept on alert. So and the first thing is homesickness. It's very normal for our students to become homesick. I'm sure many of us, Madrichot, were also homesick, right? So that's normal. And they're sad. Sometimes they're going to miss a class, or they're going to cry. They miss their parents. They're not home for the game. That's really typical. A cause for concern is when there's intense, painful, long-lasting moods, when your students are so sad, so overwhelmed, so like painfully and intense, sad that they can't function, that it's really getting in the way of functioning and being able to experience seminary. So we want to keep an eye out for that. The next one is increased self-consciousness and increased focus on body image. It makes a lot of sense that girls are going to be talking about their looks, their weight, everything they're eating in seminary, right? Like whether we like it or not, it's a lot of girls and they're teenagers and they're still figuring themselves out, and it's very, very normal. So how do we know when it's typical and it's typical what girls are talking about, and it's also a cause for concern? So typical, like we said, is just talking, more caring about their self-conscious, more focused on body image. A cause for concern is social phobia or withdrawal. So when a student is so concerned about their body image that they're not coming to events, or they're, like hiding from every single picture, or they're withdrawing because of this, or perfectionism, where they have to look absolutely perfect, or everything just has to be perfect. And it's in the extreme. Again, everything here is in moderation. We want to be everything moderate. When anything is too extreme, that's when we would think, something to be concerned. Binging, purging, or restricting eating, which is things that will go on later with Heather will talk about later with eating disorders, but that would be something when a girl is binging and eating and then throwing up or not eating a lot, things like that, causes for concern. And obsessive or neglectful of hygiene. So when someone's like really, really obsessive about their hygiene, washing their face 7 times a day, brushing their teeth like all the time. And of course, in seminary, there's some girls that are neater and more, particular than other girls, and that's regular, and that's how it is. But when it becomes to an obsessive amount that it's getting in the way of their functioning, that's when we want to, like put on those warning signs and be like, oh, that's something to look out for. And the next one, again, it obviously, we're not talking about seminary rules or anything like that, and every seminary is different, but we just wanted to touch that experimentation with drugs, alcohol, or cigarettes. So if a girl is, one time goes drinking or whatever, again, not condemning, condoning, just this happens, it doesn't necessarily mean all of a sudden that it's a cause for concern in terms of mental health. We want to differentiate between just experimenting and being away from home and, figuring things out, and regular substance use. So when someone is regularly drinking, regularly smoking, regular cigarettes, that would be a concern, a mental health concern. And then the next one is stressful transition to seminary, which is very typical. I'm sure for the Madrichot also, it's a transition. Some of you may have moved this year. Like, it's a really big transition. We want to keep that in mind and be, validating and empathic towards our students, and all that, is normal transition. The thing when it becomes a little bit, something to keep an eye out is when we're concerned that our students aren't going to classes, they're ditching most of their classes, they're not connecting with their peers or teachers, they're really withdrawing, and they're not integrating at all, and they're not having some days that are stressful where they're going to ditch class. All their days are stressful, or many of their days are stressful, and that is when it would be a cause for concern, that it's not just the transition, but it's something more than that. Okay. Another thing to keep in mind is becoming stressed by everyday decision making. Again, with many of us probably relate to it. Decision making can be stressful, but when it would be out of the ordinary and something to be concerned is when they become paralyzed with indecision. When they're not able to, on a Monday night, should I go to Ben Yehuda or should I eat dinner with my friends? And they're so stressed out about this decision that they just sit there till 11 o'clock at night, not being able to make a decision. And this happens every single Monday night. Or they can't decide what classes, or they can't literally do anything, and it's paralyzing them. That would be another cause for concern. Another typical thing is messy rooms. Girls are messy. A lot of them had moms or cleaning ladies cleaning up for them back in America. But here, they're adjusting, and that's okay. Messy rooms are fine. When it would be something more to look out for is when you walk into a room, you're doing curfew, and clothing are covered all over the floor. You can't find basic necessities. It's really, really dirty, and it's not livable, because everyone needs to live in a space that, is, like we said, livable. So we want to make sure that it's nothing too much to the extreme. And then the last thing is a later sleep schedule. Like, you guys also are going to have probably less sleep than you're used to, because Madrichot life is really busy and can be really stressful. And that means sometimes you might wake up later, and sometimes you might miss your own classes, and that's okay. So we want to, but if you want to translate that to the students, they're going to go to sleep later. It's seminary. They're going to be having DMCs, and they're going to be doing homework, and I don't know, and they're going to be learning in the base, and that's regular, and missing class sometimes because you're sleeping in, that can be. But when they're up all night, they're sleeping all day, they're late to all their classes or many of their classes because of sleep schedule, and it's just become this very vicious cycle that's way too extreme and not moderate. That would be something that we would be like, okay, cause for concern, something to keep an eye on. So those are just the general things that we wanted to differentiate between typical and out of the ordinary. Any questions? No. Okay, we'll move on. Depression warning signs. Okay, so depression is a word that I'm sure you guys all have heard, but we just want to, define or show you some signs of what does it mean, depression, and when should it be, when should I be concerned for my students. So first thing of depression, first warning sign is, mood instability and dysregulation. So when a student is really dysregulated and really, very blah and not, mood isn't like stable and whatever, that is something to be, concerned about. Feeling of sadness and melancholy. Again, students are going to be sad. We're all sad. But when it's just a lot of sadness and a lot of melancholy and a lot of down, that is something that can be a warning sign for depression. Depression warning sign, loss of interest in some pleasurable activities. So for example, if a student, I don't know if Kedma is happening this year, but if a student is very into singing and very into Kedma, and like one of those girls is always involved, and all of a sudden they completely lose interest in that pleasurable activity, which they always find so pleasurable, and they are always involved in, and they're just like blah. Or a student that's very engaged in classes, all of a sudden they stop engaging in classes. That's something, can be a warning sign for depression. Fatigue, so if someone's really tired all the time, can be a warning sign. Insomnia, also, someone can't sleep all the time, another depression warning sign. Prolonged feelings of hopelessness is when people, our students would just feel completely hopeless, like they want to give up. It's just so blah, everything's just, they can't do it, and just really hopeless. And then another one, which I was formerly a Madrichot, and I found this frequently, is complaints of not feeling well with no obvious medical causes. Is sometimes the student will say like, I'm really not feeling well, and then you'll say, what's wrong? Like, I don't know, I'm just not feeling well. And you'll take them to Terem a few times, and there's no medical causes. They're just not feeling well. They're just not feeling well. They're just not feeling well. So all of these would be depression warning signs. Yeah. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Heather, you want to go on?
Sure.
Oh, sorry. Hold on.
Okay, so now I wanted to talk about anxiety warning signs. So anxiety generally is worrying about things. It could take different forms. So you could notice students are struggling with social anxiety. A lot of the things we're going to be talking about are going to sort of be overlapping, but hopefully it won't be too confusing. So um, so some students might just be so anxious about being around other students that they're not partaking in activities, they're not socializing, they're not going out, they're isolating. That could be a sign of anxiety. Insomnia, inability to sleep, at night, when a lot of times people can sort of manage their anxiety during the day, it's busy, there's distractions, and at night, when it gets quiet and there are no distractions, a lot of times people's anxious thoughts really get intense and they can't fall asleep. Perfectionism that seems like a handicap. So um, again, just not being able to function in life because everything has to be perfect. That it's impeding their happiness. It's impeding their adjustment. That could be a sign of anxiety. Feeling on edge, irritable, restless, easily fatigued. When we're always anxious and worrying and we're tense, it's exhausting. And so you might notice some students are just really tired a lot of the time or just get tired easily. Again, not any one of these symptoms is a cause for concern. It's more when you start seeing a pattern, when you start seeing a few of these symptoms, with the same person. Difficulty concentrating. Again, when we're worrying, we're thinking about, when our mind is busy thinking about all different things that could go wrong and things that we're worried about in general, it's hard to concentrate on other things. And muscle tension, which is just like a physical manifestation of feeling anxious. Okay, so in terms of eating issues, just some specific things to keep an eye out for is noticing girls are skipping meals, noticing if any girls lose a lot of weight over the course of the year, if they're obsessing about food, what they eat, what they don't eat, how much they're going to eat, obsessing with exercise, binging, so just eating a lot of food at once, maybe a lot of junk food at once, purging, vomiting. And then just things to be aware of in general is to notice if students are having really extreme relationships or friendship issues. So if you see two girls who become really dependent on each other and they're always together and they don't have anything to do with anybody else, or if you see you see girls who are really close and then they have fights and there's a lot of drama in the relationship, there's likely deeper issues that they're dealing with if you're seeing these types of relationships forming in seminary. Also, you may or may not know about students' family histories, but if you do know that students come from a family where there was a lot of conflict or drama or trauma that was never addressed, I would keep a closer eye on them because it might be affecting them and they might need help during the time they're in Israel. Are there any questions about anxiety, eating issues, or just these general factors to be aware of?
I think so.
Okay. You guys can also just type, you could just, if you have any questions that come up, you don't have to verbally say them. You can also just type them up.
Okay. So next topic, we're going to be talking about understanding. So what is and responding to self-harm. So what do you do if one of your students tells you about self-harm, and let's understand it. So first of all, what is self-harm? So some examples of self-harm would be cutting, which can be with a knife or a scissor, cutting your skin, burning, so let's say with matches or a lighter, skin picking, where a student would constantly be picking their skin where it gets deeper and deeper, hair pulling, so someone constantly pulling out their hair, and scratching their skin. And these are some examples of self-harm. And just to preface this, like, it's we don't want you to go leave this training thing like, oh my god, I should be so like worried, like so much is going on. Like, again, all these things like can happen, likely can happen, but not every single student is going to be self-harming. So you just to keep it in mind, because it can be a really prevalent topic. So why would someone engage in self-harm? Why would one of your students want to self-harm themselves? So there's three reasons which are very prevalent. And the first one is getting relief from painful or distressing feelings. So sometimes when people feel a lot of pain or a lot of distress, it really grounds them and calms them down to harm themselves, to physically feel the pain and to ground them. So that a lot of clients or a lot of students will find a lot of relief from that. Another one is dealing with feelings of numbness. So a lot of times people just don't feel anything and they just want to feel, there's so much pain, but they can't feel anything, that they'll hurt themselves or physically hurt themselves in order to feel. And then they feel that they can feel. And then another one, which I think in seminary probably also very prevalent, is communicating pain or distress to others. So when they're, when you see burn marks or when you see scratches on them, they're telling you something. They're saying like, cry for attention. I'm in so much pain. I don't have the means to articulate that I'm in pain and that I need help, but maybe you're going to notice or you're going to see, and that I really need help and I'm in so much pain and it's really, a big deal for me. So I'm in a lot of pain. So that is some examples of self-harm and what would motivate someone to engage in self-harm. Okay. So now responding to self-harm, I think, it can be really used for anything that we're responding to, but we wanted to do b'dafka and self-harm because it can be really overwhelming for the Madrichot if a student comes to you and says, like, I've been scratching myself or I've been burning myself, or if you see, scratches on a student or things like that, it can be very overwhelming for you. So we wanted to break it down. So first, do validate and accept their feelings. We always want to validate, as I'm sure Amudim spoke about last time. We just want to validate and accept their feelings. We understand, we feel your pain. We feel that you're feeling, stressed or hurt or anxious or depressed, and we understand, and we're validating that and showing you care. We want to show that we care, like in every situation, we want to show our students that we're here for you and we care. And the reason that we're, speaking about this and whatever is just because we care and we love you. And then you want to ask, how else can you manage these feelings, right? So if they're cutting themselves because they're depressed or they're anxious, how else can you manage these feelings? Can you speak to someone? Can you find a distraction tool? How else can you take all this pain and what can you channel it into? And then another one, which is very important, is can you get professional help to learn skills that you need? Because this is not something that a madricha, can take on by themselves. This is a really difficult thing, and the professional help will help them channel their pain and all their emotions into healthier outlets. So you want to try and get them professional help, and also suggest distractions. So until they get the professional help, until whatever, like, you feel that you need to harm yourself, maybe listen to music or go on a walk or, do headspace on your app, any on your phone, anything that can be a distraction tool. So those are some things that we want to do, because it's not just stomp cutting. It's coming out of a place of pain and emotions. And these are two things that we don't want to do, which I've heard common is provoke guilt trips or shame. Don't say how gross it is. I've heard people tell me, like, people have told me, like, it's usher from the Torah, you can't harm your body, just stop. Like, that's not going to help. Like, it might come from a good place, but you want to, not make them feel bad about it. I'm sure they're feeling really bad about it already. So we want to, we want to be careful with body language and facial expressions, not be like, ew, gross, like try to, as much as possible, keep a calm and collected. And also, and they won't trust you anymore if you react, in a like, ew, that's gross kind of way. And the last thing is, don't say, just stop. Like, don't say, just stop. It's really hard to stop these kind of behaviors. It can even be dangerous to take away someone's way of coping when they haven't yet learned a healthier way to cope. So this is their way of coping with what they're going through. Again, we want to change that. It's not healthy, but we don't want to just say, just stop, and forget about it. And that doesn't usually work. So yeah. Okay. Any questions? Well, maybe we'll take questions at the end. Okay.
Okay, so now I'm going to talk about addictions. So there's two different types of addictions that I'm going to talk about. One is chemical and one is behavioral. It could be that when you think addictions, you think more about chemical addictions, being an alcoholic or things like that. So different types of, there's many different types of chemicals a person can become addicted to. I just wrote some of them. Alcohol is one, pain medication, cannabis, weed, nicotine, cigarettes, amphetamines are some possible chemical addictions. So symptoms of chemical addictions and just things that you can be looking out for. I don't know. I don't know if it's realistic. Maybe Chedva, you know better how likely it is that there could be seminary girls who actually have addictions. I don't know.
Depends on the seminary, I would say. Some more than others.
Okay. So just some things to look out for are intense cravings for whatever chemical it is they're addicted to. Need to increase the amount of substance used to achieve the same effect. So it could be someone would get a desired effect from drinking one beer. Let's say if they go out and because they're drinking so regularly, they're up to 3 or 4 beers to have the same effect. Unease if one can't access the substance, so really like becoming dependent on it and getting stressed if you can't use it, get it. Difficulty handling life's responsibilities because of substance use. Difficulties with friendships, relationships as connected to substance use. Spending less time doing activities that one used to enjoy. Inability to stop using, and withdrawal symptoms when you try to quit. So again, I don't know how likely it is you're going to be seeing people actually with chemical addictions, but just wanted to go through it quickly. So the next one I think might be a little bit more likely. These are behavioral addictions, and behavioral addictions can apply to many different behaviors. I just wrote down some common ones. So one would be internet, another one would be shopping, video games, intimacy, sex, food, or risky behavior. And just to sort of explain, people engage in certain behaviors often to regulate themselves in the moment. So if somebody's feeling really depressed or feeling just very emotional and they don't know how to manage all the emotion they're feeling, they might, to try to feel better in the moment, go and buy something, or they might go eat something, or they might just try to avoid what they're feeling all day long by being on the internet, being on their phones. So in the short term, there's something effective about engaging in these behaviors. In the long term, though, there are consequences, right? Because if we're always on the internet, if we're always spending money that we may or may not have, or getting together with the opposite sex, or eating when we're not really hungry, there's going to be obviously long-term negative consequences of those behaviors. So some symptoms of behavioral addictions are spending large amounts of time engaging in the behavior, using the behavior to manage unwanted emotions. That's what I was talking about before, right? When you're feeling overwhelmed with negative emotions, it makes you feel better in the short term. Maybe we could all relate to that, right? But as Chedva has said before, it's all about extremes. So it could be in our experiences, we went and bought something when we were feeling a little down, it made us feel better. Okay, fine. But if it's happening all the time, then that's becomes an issue, obviously. Having urges to engage in the behavior, even if it negatively impacts daily life, responsibilities, or relationships. So if you have a student who's on her phone all day long and she's not interacting with other students, she's not focusing in her classes, she's just kind of removed and disconnected, obviously that's a problem. It's really impacting on her experience of being in seminary. Hiding or lying about the amount of time spent on the behavior. Difficulty avoiding the behavior. Sometimes people want to stop engaging in the behavior. They understand the consequences are disruptive, but they just can't. They don't know any other way to manage their emotions, and they've gotten very dependent on the behavior. Irritability, restlessness, anxiety, depression, or other withdrawal symptoms when attempting to stop the behavior.
Heather, I got a question. Someone messaged me. How do you know when someone's just a regular teenager on their phone or someone's actually addicted to their phone?
I think that's a great question, and one could argue most people are addicted to their phones nowadays. I guess and maybe Chedva, you maybe have, again, you were in a seminary last year. Maybe you have more insight into this, but can they put the phone down? Can they join in an activity that everybody else is part of, or it's completely taking over? I don't know. That's what I would think. What do you? Did you have any students who, like you, that was an issue?
I mean, I feel like most of us these days are really on our phones, but students that couldn't put it down, couldn't go to class without a phone, always needed every second, Snapchatting, Instagram every single second, that couldn't breathe, without it, I would classify that more as an addiction, that really couldn't be without.
But it's definitely a good question, and it's tricky to decipher who's perhaps addicted to their phone and who's everybody else, because it's a very fine line, I think, nowadays.
Thank you. Okay. So now for the last section, we just want to understand suicidal behaviors. So what is suicidal behavior? So a suicide attempt involves behavior that an individual has engaged with the intent to die. So someone wants to die. The act may be planned, so someone could be planning it for a while, or it can be impulsive, like super last minute, like super impulsive that, there's just too much pain and they want to die. So a non-violent method, which is can be very common. Again, hopefully, not in our seminaries, but we just want to cover it. It would be overdosing. So someone would take, pills or things like that and to overdose. And then violent methods would be hanging, jumping, or slitting wrists. So those would be some how to understand suicidal behaviors. Okay, so now what to do in emergencies? So meaning in this, if a student would attempt suicide on your watch or in a seminary, the first thing that is very important is to call Atella right away. Call Atella. We don't want to play games. We're not telling the staff first, like calling, first we want to, get them the help they need right away and call Atella, and then tell the staff. And obviously, communicate the staff whenever we want to make sure that if it's a real suicide attempt that we're getting emergency help right away. And then resources, tell the student that, I guess in any emergency that she needs professional resources and you don't feel that you're enough. Because again, we or the Madrichot are not mental health counselors or social workers or psychologists. We are just their Madrichot, and we cannot ever be enough. Like, it's not our job, basically. So Heather, do you have anything to add for suicide attempts or Malka? So
No,
I think,
no.
oh, come on. I think that's all the material that we've covered.
Well, we have some case examples.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
I think someone just posted a good question, actually, asking if it has to be Hatzalah or can it be an ambulance?
Heather, you want to answer?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think it matters. You could, I guess, speak to your seminary, administration and see if they have a preference. Hopefully, obviously, you're not going to have to be in the situation, but the main point is to get somebody help as quickly as possible if they're really in immediate danger. So I don't think it really matters who comes to help, which emergency service comes to help.
Right. But I think it's important if chas v'shalom someone was to get into this situation to tell whoever the help is over the phone, that it could potentially be, a suicide issue or someone's trying to harm themselves, just so that they know what they're coming into, because sometimes the situation could be a little bit complicated and they'll send people that are capable of handling it.
That's a good point.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Oh, now we have two case examples that we've taken from real life scenarios. Obviously with details change, but okay. Okay, so first case example of depression. So Rachel was a popular, fun, and outgoing student. 2 months into seminary, she began sleeping until 12 every day and staying in bed for many of her classes. She would complain that she wasn't feeling well, but couldn't pinpoint what was bothering her. Her roommates took her to term 3 times, and each time the doctors couldn't find anything wrong with her. She continued to complain she wasn't feeling well and was losing interest in some STEM activities. During curfew, you find her lying in bed, crying or staring at the ceiling blankly for multiple days in a row. You are confused because you've also seen her laughing, surrounded by friends on other occasions. So what should you do? So this would be probably an example of someone exhibiting depression, symptoms of depression. And I think the important part here is that you're confused because you also see her laughing, because sometimes people experience, and she's surrounded by friends, she's very popular, when she's out of bed, she's like having a good time. You're like, wait, it can't be the same person that's lying in bed crying and this person. So I think something really important to keep in mind is not, if someone experiences depression, not every single second are they going to be laying in bed and depressed. And if they're exhibiting a lot of warning signs, even if there's other things that don't exactly add up, you still would want to pass it up and tell the seminary, I'm seeing a lot of signs that can look like depression. She's really sad. She's really not herself. She's not feeling well. And you want to make sure that we're taking care of that. Okay, next.
This is an eating disorder case example. Shira seemed like the perfect student. She always had a thoughtful question or comment in class, had lots of friends, and generally seemed happy. Around a month into the school year, one of her Madrichot noticed that Shira was barely eating anything during meals. She approached Shira about it, and Shira denied a problem, saying she just didn't like the food in seminary. Later in the year, another student reported that she saw Shira vomiting in the bathroom. Shira also seemed to have lost weight since she arrived. What should the Madrichot do? Anybody have any ideas? So I think sort of a general response to any type of red flag or, questionable issue that comes up is to approach the student. This Madrichot did approach the student, and the student initially denied there was a problem. Certainly after hearing that a student was vomiting in the bathroom, I mean, assuming she wasn't sick, I would think the Madrichot should follow up with her. And very likely this girl should be referred for therapy, because it can be very dangerous to be not eating sufficiently, a sufficient amount of food, to be vomiting. The thing with eating disorders, oftentimes, as we mentioned earlier, people with eating disorders really present wonderfully. You may not know there's a problem at all. They tend to be perfectionistic, have a lot of friends, just seem like, as I wrote, the perfect student. So, and it can get very tricky, as Chedva talked about earlier, when in general girls in seminary may be fussy about food or might be very body conscious. So it might not be so obvious to pick up warning signs when there's actually a more serious problem. And we're going to do a role play also now, right?
Yeah, we can do it.
Okay. All right, so we're just going to do a role play to finish off, and then certainly it's open for questions, any questions that you may have. Chedva is going to be a student. I'm going to be a madricha.
Okay. Hi, Heather. I just wanted to. I feel like I should tell you, but like, don't tell. I've been cutting myself, and I just wanted to show you. See.
I'm so happy you came to me and shared that. I bet that might have been hard to do.
Yeah, but like, whatever.
Yeah, so what's going on for you?
I don't know. I'm just in so much pain, and I just don't know what to do. I just need to feel something, so I keep just cutting myself.
Mm-hmm. Is this something that started since you got here, or you were?
Yeah,
also happens?
since something got here. I really hate my roommates, and there's just so much going on.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it sounds like you're really struggling right now.
Yeah, a lot.
Do you think that maybe it'd be helpful to talk to somebody outside the seminary to get some support?
I'm talking to you. Doesn't that help?
Yeah, and I'm always here for you, and I want you to feel like you can come to me and talk to me. But I'm not a professional, and if you're cutting yourself, it seems like it's more than just, you don't like your roommates. Like, that's pretty serious.
I guess.
So you want to think about it? I could try to find someone, who might be a good match for you.
Yeah, fine, I guess. But like, I don't want to stop. Are you gonna make me stop?
No, nobody's gonna make you do anything. Just want to make sure that you stay safe and that you have support while you're here.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
So there are any questions? Kind of a jam-packed. Yeah.
I just wanted to elaborate like why we chose this one is because if you see, it's like a very scary thing that I'm coming to Heather with, right? I'm scared, I'm uncomfortable, and I'm sure Heather was also really uncomfortable if she were a madricha. It's very scary, but she stayed extremely calm, cool, and collected, and it was really, easier for me to open up and feel safe, and that would be really with any mental health things, anything coming, just to stay calm and cool, whatever it is, mental health, not mental health, when someone's sharing with you, just to stay and non-judgmental and validating, can really make it an effective experience for the student.